Bonus credit. Add a delete button to each list item that removes it from the list. Don't forget to break it down if you don't know how to do it. Don't know how to make it removed from the list? Can you make a button? Just make a button. Start there. Yeah, Catherine.
I had a question. What terminology do you use for this dot as a variable because it's not affected?
Property. Yep. This would be a property. So let's make ourselves a button. So that would go inside the item, right? The item, in addition to having all those spans, will now also have a button. So here we loop over the properties. After we're done with that, let's just add a delete button. Add a delete button. So where do I start? How about document.createElement button? Right? You want to create a button? Let's create a button. Document.createElement button. No problem. I'm doing this in render item. So it's just one more thing that goes inside that list item, right? In addition to all these spans. And let's put some text in there. Not const. We got our delete button here. Dot text contents equals delete. Cool. We better get it on the page, right? Item.append child. Delete button. Let's check that out. There you go. Got a button now. Doesn't do anything, but by golly, it's there. Step in the right direction. Get it so far? Just creating a new button, making sure there's some text in it, and we're appending it to the list item. So now we have this function that is responsible for building that whole list item, right? So we just stick it in there after all the spans. Make sense so far? But it doesn't do anything. How do we make a button do something in general? What do we do to that button? Did that part. Problem is now that clicking it doesn't do anything, right? Need to add an event listener. Yep. So we can do that before we append, just so it's not on the page until it has the event listener. So delete button dot add event listener. The event we're listening for is click. And what are we going to run when we do? A function that doesn't exist yet, right? So let's, you ever heard dress for the job you want, not the job you have? Let's write for the method we want, not the method we have. I wish I could just write this dot remove flick. It's not there yet, but let's just put it there. This is how I want this line to work. Cool. Okay, now let's make that a real thing. So I'll make a new method called remove flick. It is an event handler, right? So I can throw EV in there. Now what? How about let's just console log to make sure this much works. Deleted. Deleted. Yep. We hooked up the event listener, right? We didn't actually delete anything, so how do we do it? What do we need to do? First, we need to delete the LI, right? Before we start worrying about the array. Question or suggestion? Or?
Question about the EV.
Huh?
Before you continue on, is the EV something that you really declared before, or is that?
So, because remove flick is acting as an event handler, JavaScript, when it calls remove flick, because we're not the ones calling it, JavaScript's calling it, it's always going to pass an event object in as the argument. And so it's going to do that whether we put it inside the parentheses or not. But if we want to do anything with it, we need to name it something. But we can name it absolutely anything. We can name it pancake breakfast. It would still be an event. So I just call it EV because that makes sense. So it is something that JavaScript is passing in automatically whether I ask for it or not. And it's an event object. So what do? Yes. I do need to do that. But where do I even start? What do I do next? Yes. Splice? Splice. Yeah, we're not going to worry about the array yet, though. We're going to do the UI first. So we're going to take the li off the page. So to bake an apple pie from scratch, you must first create the universe. To remove an li from the page, first you need that li, don't you? So how can we get the li from here? What? We're not going to do it that way. That's cheating.
Why don't you replace that on the list? Replace the list.
That's too far. That's going too far. I just want to grab that one li. Yeah, Catherine? The parent element of event.target? Fancy. So event.target will be what? The button, right? The thing that we clicked. So the target of the event is always the thing that actually got clicked or got submitted or whatever. So event.target is the button. So let's just experiment with this in the console here. So now my button is $0, $0 dot parent element. That's the li. That seems to do it. Or const item equals event dot target dot parent element. Now what? I've got the item. How do I delete it? No, can't quite do that. Splice? Not from here, unfortunately. I'm trying to delete it from the DOM. Delete it from the page. Yeah, Kieran. Remove child, which means we need to know the parent of that thing, right? Right? Yeah, that was the parent of the button. Now I've got the list item, which is the thing I actually want to remove. And as it turns out, if we just look here, JavaScript remove child. To remove something from the DOM, you have to call remove child, not just remove. So you have to know its parent. It's kind of silly that this is the case, but it's the case. So we need its parent too, which is the actual list, right? So you could do, what'd you do? Did you do parent element again? Yeah. So we could do that. Const list equals item dot parent element, and then list dot remove child item. Let's see about that. Enter flick Thor hymns bulleted cap Evans bulleted Dino Pratt bulleted Boston boat pine bulleted. Yep.
What if you have two and then delete the first one?
Yep, sure. Yep, it's going to delete the right one every time. Since we get through it through the event target, we're guaranteed to get the right one every time. Here's another little trick. So what if the button weren't immediately inside the list item? What if there were a div in between? Like what if I wrapped my buttons in another div that contains all my buttons? Because I'm totally going to do that later today. So there's another function that does not work in Internet Explorer, fair warning, but it does work in Edge, called closest. And the way closest works is you pass it a selector, just like query selector. So our list item has a class of flick on it. So I pass in the selector flick. And what closest does is it looks at the ancestors of that element. So it will first test the element itself. So it would test the button. Does this button have a class of flick? Nope. How about its parent? Does it have a class of flick? Yep. Okay, it'll return that and stop looking. But if I were to put a div around the button, it would check the button first. No, that's not a flick. Check the div, not a flick. Check the li, that's my flick. So I'd return that. So that kind Gives us a little more flexibility in how we set up the DOM, because this is going to break as we change our HTML potentially. But there's yet another way that we could do this. What was the final way that I did it this morning? We do this so many different ways. Let me see what I actually taught this morning. I did closest for a while, but I changed it. I know what I did. So what's another way we could do this? I don't want to go to the work of grabbing this one from the DOM. I already have it. It's already right up here, right? So what if I could just pass it in as an argument? What if I could just pass that in as an argument to remove flick? If I wanted to do that, how would I do it? Because I'm not calling flick here, right? I can't remove. I can't just do that, right? What could I do? What could I do if I wanted to pass the list item as an argument to remove flick? That's right. Look at the big brain on stage. We could do the arrow thing. The hottest dance craze sweeping the nation. Yeah, so what if remove flick weren't the event handler? What if this were the event handler? And then we call this.remove flick. And then we could just pass the item right in. Deleted. Still works. See what I'm doing there? We've already got the list item. Why grab it from the DOM again? Let's just pass it right in as an argument. And you know what? The list, we're grabbing the list off the DOM every time we submit the form, but it never changes. It's the same list every time. We're just grabbing it over and over. Not that that's a super expensive operation or anything, but what if we just did this in the constructor? What if I just store the list up here? Then I can use it here. Don't need to do this. I can just say this.list. Then I don't need to do this. How about that? It's down to a one-liner. We're using the list enough, and the list never changes, and I feel okay about just setting that as a property. So now we're passing the item in as an argument to remove flick, and the list we're actually storing as a property on the object itself. Let's see about that. Ron Howard, Ferrari driver movie. Hemsworth. I think it was just called Drive or something. Deleted. We got it. What do you think? You dig? This commit will remove flicks from the UI. Didn't really take all that much code. Just takes some thinking, right? We're connecting a lot of pieces. We've used all these pieces before. Just got to make those connections in our head. Nice thing about this arrow function is this also makes this work in here, right? This would not have been bound to the right thing the other way we were doing it. Questions? Yeah. So if remove flick were just the direct event handler here, it would be the same as the target. It would be the button. So it's the way that you call a method, not the way that it's written. So even though the method itself doesn't change here, if it were acting as an event handler directly without an arrow function calling it, just the way JavaScript was written, event handlers always have this bound to the target of the event. Now it's the object. It's the this that we want. Yeah. So that's because of two things. One, the arrow function means that inside the arrow function, it's bound to the right thing. And then because we call remove flick using the actual dot notation, actual method invocation, it sets it to the right thing. Yeah.
Why doesn't it automatically just have this be the right thing? Because like,
You would have to ask Brendan Ikes, who wrote JavaScript in 10 days.
okay.
Just a decision made a long time ago that we have to live with. There's some thinking to the fact that inside an event handler, you're often going to want to get to the target, right? I'm not sure if that event.target thing was there in the very first version. I don't remember. But I do remember that when I was writing JavaScript in the late 90s, I used this to get to the thing that was submitted or clicked or whatever. Since that's how the language is designed, you can't really change it. But what you could do is introduce brand new syntax that changes it. So arrow functions are completely new syntax, so we can make them do what we want. So, yeah.